note is printed, not one coin is minted, not one piece of precious metal is moved anywhere. That's all they do. They type the figure into his account. It is a book ledger, as was now a computer operation. And from that moment on, that guy is paying interest on 100 grand. That has never, does not, and will never exist. This world is up to its neck on an individual, business and company level and country level, in debt on fresh air. That's the reality of the situation. And this is not just naval contemplating again, this is fundamental to control. Because if you ask most people why they're not doing what they really want to do and saying and being what they really want to say and be, it will be, yes, fear of what other people think of them, yeah. But it will also be, well mate, I've got to keep my head down, because I've got to keep my mouth shut, because, I might lose my job and all that stuff. In other words, we fear not being able to earn enough money for the basics of life. So if you can artificially inflate the price of everything, you are more focusing people on that problem, and you're making it more difficult for them to earn the basics of life. Therefore, they're working harder and harder and harder, their heads down, and they're not looking there at any level. And this is what this scam does. It means, for instance, that we buy 3 or 4 houses for the privilege of living in one. And who benefits from this? Not the guy who builds it, he's paid out the price of one. Not the supplier of the materials, he's paid out the price of one. The only person that benefits, who benefits from us buying 3 or 4 houses to live in one, is the guy that's lending us money that doesn't exist and charging us interest on it. I went into a bank in Britain called the National Westminster Bank, and I got one of their mortgage leaflets out of interest, and it was in black and white on this thing. If I took out a £50,000 loan to buy a house with this bank, I would pay them back 152 grand. And on the front of the leaflet it said, the National Westminster Bank, we're here to make life easier. So the mortgage rate could come down immediately by 2/3 if governments issued the currency interest-free. How much taxation every year, it's billions and billions every year in America on the federal level, goes just to pay the interest on private banks' non-existent lending to governments. The American government, and it's the same with all governments, they could print their money interest-free, put it into circulation interest-free. Therefore, there's no interest to pay. Instead, what the American government does is borrow their money from something called the Federal Reserve System, a cartel of private banks called Federal to kid the people, which is actually no more federal than Federal Express. The current head of the Federal Reserve is Alan Greenspan, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. He replaced a guy called Paul Volcker, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations. Like getting wet paint on your hands, isn't it? It gets anywhere. And the government could print its own money interest-free. According to what I can ascertain, 2 American presidents have suggested and even started to introduce in some small way interest-free money printed by the government instead of borrowing it from the private banks. One is John F. Kennedy, the other one was Abraham Lincoln. They have one of the things in common. Also, what this means is that every single product we pick off the shelf of any kind is vastly inflated in terms of its price compared with what it needs to be, because right along the production, transportation, advertising, selling process of that product and puts it on the shelf, each group and organisation and person along that road is adding extra to their prices because they're borrowing non-existent money from banks and they have to pay back interest on it. It's a massive scam. Not only that, it's built into the system that the debt must get bigger. Because when you go into a bank and you borrow money, they, even in the ludicrous way they do, they create it into some kind of nonsensical existence, but they only create what you've borrowed. Say 50 grand. But you're not paying back 50 grand, you're paying back 50 grand plus the interest. They haven't created the interest, only the capital. So where's the interest and all these loans got to come from? It's got to come from the money in circulation. And that means, in simple mathematics, that there is never ever enough money in circulation to pay back all the capital and all the interest on all the debt. Ever. So there always comes a point where some people go bankrupt because some people have to, if some people are not going to, because of the way the money works. And we see it with governments. They get to the point where they can no longer service the capital on the debt, and they borrow more just to pay back the interest on the old loans. Because it's structured like that. And there's one other major aspect to this. What is the difference between an economic depression and an economic boom? One thing and one thing alone. The amount of units of exchange in circulation. That's all it is. When there's a depression, people don't choose not to want to eat anymore. They don't say, oh, I don't want a house anymore, I don't want a job anymore. There's not enough units of exchange in circulation to have the economic activity which allows them to eat, have a home and a job. When there's a boom, there's a vast amount of units of exchange in circulation, therefore lots of economic activity. And what happens during a boom? Lots of economic activity because there's lots of exchange in circulation. So, companies wish to increase their production to meet demand. And what do to do that? They borrow more money from the banks. So, debt goes up during a boom, and then what do the banks do? Because the banks, controlled by the same people, have absolute control over the units of exchange and how much is in circulation. Big boom, big debt, take the unit of exchange out. Stop lending so much money, call in lots of the debts that are already out there. Depression, bankruptcy. What do the banks get? All that wealth that does exist. Thank you very much. And over many centuries, this is how this organization has taken over the world. And a few people can't control the planet. It's a piece of cake. Which is where we come in. Because 5 billion people can only be controlled by a handful, because 5 billion people have given their power away on the most incredible scale. But we take it back and this is all over. Because this is a house of cards, like I said at the start, which depends on us being sheep and not multidimensional infinity. When I first started, I had this explosion in my head 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I heard this line, we create our own reality. I thought that feels good to me, that feels right, but there must be a way that we do it. A simple way that it happens if it does happen. And it seems to me it works like this. This next 10 minutes or so might not seem to be related to this, but it fundamentally is. The way we got into this mess, I feel, is way out of it, which can be ever so quick. For me, everything that exists in creation is the same energy, and energy is consciousness. They're the same thing. We are like droplets of water in an ocean of consciousness, individual to an extent, but altogether we are the whole. At this moment, there are droplets of water crashing on the shore of Vancouver, of the south coast of England, of Australia, California, all over the world, but they are droplets of the same mass of water. We are each other. We are everything. But we are unique aspects of everything, and that's what we have so comprehensively given up in so many examples. The evolutionary process is dead simple. Experience, learn, evolve. Dead simple. You have the experience, you learn from the consequence of the decisions you make, you move on. If we had random experiences, then our evolution would be incredibly slow, because we'd have experiences here, we'd learn everything they had to offer, and we'd say, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, move on. But because experiences were random, we'd go on at different points by the law of averages, having the same experiences, and we think, what's the point in this? I've been there. So what this genius of creation has done is set up designer evolution, which I think works like this. I think this whole thing that I'm saying was summed up by an American comedian called Bill Hicks, who died in 1994 at the age of 33. Very brave man, very profound and intelligent man. And he said, matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is just a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. And it's that last point, the imagination of ourselves, which allows us to create our own reality, which works like this for me. We are broadcasting a magnetic pattern which is unique to us. It's a unique expression of our imagination of ourselves. Our point in the evolutionary journey, where we're at, because it's a magnetic pattern, we feel it on people. We say good and bad vibes and all this stuff, we feel it on people. That magnetic pattern is pulling towards it other magnetic energy fields that sync with what we're putting out. These energy fields are known better as people, places, ways of life, experiences. So when we look through our eyes, we are looking at a physical replica of our imagination of ourselves. It's a very simple process because everything is thought. The physical world is merely thought made physical. This is thought made physical. Fear made physical, actually. This event tonight is thought made physical. I was asked to come here by someone who thought to ask me. I thought to accept. People thought to come. Someone thought at some point to build this building. This is thought made physical, this event, because everything is. Every physical action is preceded by a thought that decides to do it. So, if we change the way we think, we change the physical world. If we have a physical world based on fear within us, we will express that out as a world built on fear. If we express love from within us, we make a physical world based on love. It's just a choice. So for me, what happens is you're looking at yourself when you look at the people, places, ways of life that we experience. Because the pressure is also always to externalize responsibility, we're actually giving power to control our own destiny away. Because if you take your power back and you're in a situation you don't like and you say, right, I pulled this towards me, it must have been for a reason. What am I meant to gain from this? Taking your power. What am I meant to gain from this? Right, got it. Move on. At that point, you picked up the learning. Your imagination of yourself has changed. Therefore, the magnetic pattern you're putting out has subtly changed. So it stops pulling in that experience because you're not syncing with it anymore because you don't need it. And you move on and you pull something else in and the journey of evolution goes on. What happens if you externalize blame is your pattern doesn't change. Because instead of saying, what am I going to learn from this? Got it. Change pattern. Move on. We say things like, someone does something we don't like. It's, ooh, God, I hate it. It's his fault. It's all his fault. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be in this state. So, you haven't changed. So the pattern you're putting out hasn't changed. So it goes on pulling in the same pattern all the way through your life. Because you're externalizing responsibility for it. Summed up by a wonderful line I came across. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Now this is fundamental to what I'm talking about here. Because if we allow outside messages through the media, peer pressure, education, whatever, to program our imagination of ourselves, we are allowing this through us to create our physical experience. And what do I hear all over the English-speaking world? Again and again, the same line. I'm just an ordinary man and woman in the street. I've got no power. I'm just Joe Public. I've never met an ordinary man and woman in my life. They don't exist except in our minds. We're all extraordinary. But if we take on the idea that we are ordinary, that's what we put out. That's what we put in. You take on the idea that we are powerless. Out it goes. In comes a life physically that reflects powerlessness. Nothing is more controllable, and nothing has given its power away more than the victim mentality. We've all been there. I have. I could have feared for England at one time. Me. I felt guilty for the country and all. Well, I've been in all these things, maybe. But the victim mentality will always create victim reality. The world's awash with victims because the world's awash with people conditioned to see themselves as victims. You're in that victim situation and you're saying, it's me colour, it's me sexuality, it was me father, it was me upbringing, it was me job. In other words, everything's in control of my life, not me. Therefore, that's the fire that goes out. They are the magnetic fields it pulls in, and you surround yourself with a physical experience which comes from victimization. Then comes the point, because we've all been there, like I say, we've all been in victim mode, it's just that the summit gets squatters' rights, doesn't it? And there came a point in my life where I said, hold on a minute, do you know there's one common denominator between all the things that happen in your life, mate? It's you. So you're responsible. Not for handing it off to anyone else. And at that point, I started to say, right, if I've created the circumstances I don't like, I can create the ones I do. I'm not a victim, I'm in control. And what happens at that point is that the mind changes. So it stops pulling in victim circumstances to create the victim reality. Starts pulling in little coincidences, like people coming into your life at just the right time, with just the right contacts and knowledge to help you out of the circumstances you want to get out of. And if you don't know what you're doing, you say things like, honestly, mate, I was so lucky. He came at just the right time. No, you created it because you've taken control of your life again. And this is why, because at the top of this pyramid of knowledge and stuff here, the spiritual laws and the spiritual knowledge of vibrations and consciousness and magnetic fields and stuff that has been ridiculed or condemned in the public arena for centuries via inquisitions and ridicule and stuff like that, has been to keep out of the public arena the knowledge held here that has been passed on over vast amounts of time and added to in each generation at the highest levels of this secret society network. This is why they wish to hold that knowledge there and keep it from us, or if they let us have it, do it with a twist. So that instead of saying, yeah, I am me, I am free, we say, I'm a bit free, but Ashtar's still in control. In other words, I'm freer than I was, but a little bit. So, from where I'm standing anyway, three things would bring this whole thing down in a very short space of time because of what would come from this and would change our lives from victim to destiny, control of destiny. One, we individually step out of the fear of what other people think of us. Because it doesn't matter. We just think it does. Some people say to me sometimes, they say, hey, I've got a problem with you. I say, do you know, you summed it up perfectly. You've got a problem. I don't have a problem with me. I hope you sort the problem out. Thank you very much. But if we fear what other people think of us, we get pulled in there, don't we? Why has he got a problem with me? What's the matter? What's wrong with me? Now 2 people have got problems instead of 1. Leave them to it. Let them sort it out. When we step out of fear of what other people think of us, we cease to be a sheep. When enough of us do it, we cease to be a herd. This is already in desperate trouble. Secondly, we let everyone else express their uniqueness, even if, crime of crime, it acts to differ from what we think. At that point, we cease to be the police force of the herd. And thirdly, the balance point, no one seeks to impose what they believe or desire on anyone else, always respecting free will. And if we're not adult enough to live together like that, then we deserve to be manipulated. But we don't. We're not going to be for very long because this is the turning of the tide. It's no accident that it's at the same point that more and more people are waking up to who they really are. It's the same point that the veil is starting to lift on this stuff behind which it is hidden for goodness knows how long. The same energy that is acting as a spiritual alarm clock for increasing numbers of people is the same energy that's bringing this to the surface. We are in the healing crisis of planet Earth and human consciousness. For something to heal, the cause of the disease has to be dealt with. Has to be brought to the surface, healed and dealt with. While this is hidden behind the smoke screens and mirrors and gone on pulling strings without us realizing this, it has eaten away at human evolution without us realizing it. Now it's coming to the surface and we can see it. The other day, I'm lying on a bed and I'm feeling like death. I'm feeling really bad in this area, you know. I've got to speak that night in Bradford, which could have been one. No, Bradford's fine. Bradford's fine. I'm not in Bradford. And I remember saying, look, if I'm going to talk tonight, something's got to happen here because I feel like death. Within about 3 minutes, I'm having a close encounter with a piece of porcelain, see? and of course, that's horrible in the moment. But within 2 minutes, I felt okay. The cause of the problem had been removed, and I was starting to heal. And this is what for me is happening on the earth today. This stuff's rising to the surface, which is why people up there saying, it's negative, don't talk about it, oh my God, are actually ignoring what needs to be addressed and healed so that we can all move on into the next great cycle of human evolution. And like everything, it's just a choice. If I can remember what he said, Bill Hicks said one other thing that I recall, or I might not recall it, to see what he said. He was talking about life and what it was. And he said, life is like a ride in an amusement park. And when you go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly coloured and very loud. And it's fun for a while. Some have been on the ride for a long time, and they come back to us and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up! We've got a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up! Look at my furrows of worry and my big bank account and my family. This has to be real. It's a ride. And yet we kill those good guys who try to tell us that, and we let the demons run them up. But it doesn't matter, because it's just a ride. And we can change it any time we want. No job, savings of money, just a choice right now between fear and love. And in the end, that's all it is. We're surveying and we're seeing a world created by fear. Therefore, we see the world that's been created. We can create a world by love and create a very different physical experience. Not a prison, but a paradise. Not love in the sense that we come to understand it. Oh, I love you if I fancy you, darling. Or I love you if what you do is acceptable to me. Or I love you if you conform to the blueprint I think is acceptable to love. It's I love you because you exist, and what's the other point of doing anything else? It's being able to look at some of the people involved in this and say, I love you. I'm not going to stand for what you're doing because you're seeking to impose on all of us, but I love you because you're part of me and I'm part of you. We're not going to get rid of this with anger and aggression, angry Kissinger, which I hear sometimes. We're going to love it out of existence because we love into existence. The way we're going to do it is by setting ourselves free at the same time setting everyone else free. I once asked Gandhi what he thought of civilization, and he replied, I have a good idea. Ask me what I think of freedom. I think it would be a very good idea, because I don't think we've tried it yet in no human history. So often people who talk about freedom, including many people that investigate the conspiracy, are not talking about freedom. They're talking about wishing to replace an imposition they don't like with an imposition they do. That's not freedom. It's time to try the real thing, I think. And it's just a thought. You don't fight for freedom, you peace for freedom, and you love for freedom. I just finished with the words of a guy down in America who's written new words to the American national anthem, which is an English song. I didn't know that. It is. Apparently, he was telling me that when they had the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff in America, they wanted to tune. You have tunes in Canada, them sweets. Tunes help you breathe more easily.